This evening I want to talk about, as a topic, what's called the fifth skandha. There are 5 skandhas in the provisional teachings of Buddhism: form, feeling, perception, impulse, concept or memory, and consciousness, or the 6 sense fields and their objects. And I'm going to concentrate on the 5th one. Let's go through the first one. So there's the experience of being a living being, a human being. Is if you look at your experience, you can break it down into parts, which Buddhism is notorious for doing. Indian philosophy altogether is, and philosophy in some ways. So form, we use the body as a form. Then there's feeling. Then there's perception, or perceiving something, the dynamic where we perceive sounds, we perceive smells, taste, touch, feeling, we perceive thoughts. And then concept, or the tendency of the mind to conceptualize or name or give some kind of an interpretation of whatever is arising in those first 5 sense consciousnesses. In the first five sense consciousnesses of smell, sound, sight, taste, touch, and thinking. So we can talk about those also, but I want to talk about the 5th one basically, because then that can be broken down. You know, this can be broken down in lots of ways. Like, we're not saying like this is the way it is. We're just saying that meditators in times gone past have tried to look at this and see how does this break down? How do we have an experience, and what are the parts or aspects of the experience can we actually that seem to be somewhat discrete or isolated? So in the 6th or the 5th skandha, skandha is a Sanskrit word that means heap or pile, or aggregate. And so form, feeling, perception, concept, memory, and then consciousness. So in consciousness, we have just broken down again into the sense fields. And then the 6th one, which is just the thinking process that kind of organizes and synthesizes what is happening in the sense fields. So there's one basic understanding or impression of it. If we smell something and see a flower, you know, they're separate senses, but they're together. They're brought together by the 6th consciousness of the mind. So it's just kind of a processing area. There's not particularly any judging going on there. There might be some contrast happening there, seeing contrast between things, but right or wrong is not happening in that area. So then, so that's the 6th. And then the 7th area, and again, I want to say this one more time. We're not saying there's a little pocket in your head somewhere that is the 7th. We're saying that we don't know how this functions in terms of physical space. But the 7th consciousness, which you could say is part of the 6th, or not, it's sometimes called the klesha mind, or the confused area of the mind, that area of the mind that actually thinks there is a solid being that needs protecting, that there is a solid being that needs promoting, that you have some kind of definite, solid individual identity separate from everything else. And it's not that something like that isn't happening, but it's not quite as isolated as it looks to the 7th consciousness. And then the 8th consciousness, and we can go back and forth through these a little bit, but the 8th consciousness is called the Alaya Vijnana. Alaya Vijnana is, Alaya means storage, and Vijnana means divided consciousness. So it's that area of the entire mind, that area of that 5th skandha that has a couple of aspects. One, it has the aspect of being a storage area. It's sometimes said that anytime you do anything here, like in your life, walk through a room, pick some flowers, make a flower arrangement, that 7th or that 8th consciousness is, and this is the way it's described traditionally, is perfumed. use a sense consciousness that is very, very, very intimate, sense of fragrance or smell. So it's perfume. This is happening. You can't actually see something happening so much as by doing this, it tends to send or put some kind of store something in this eighth consciousness. Sometimes this is called habit energies or vasanas. So what happens as we're going along and living our life day to day, that there's always some kind of something happening in terms of this is feeding down into and informing what is happening in terms of the experience that's coming to us, and then the experience of those vasanas or those habit energies coming back down and combining with, or kind of a reverse perfuming. And what happens is that, and this is a way of talking about it to help us get a handle on it, is it seems that all of that has to pass through the seventh consciousness. And that seventh consciousness, I like to think of it as like a building with doors on both ends. And it's like there's some kind of gatekeeper situation happening there where something happens, and there's because that's feels protective. It will filter or modify or change in some way what is happening there. So this is a way of helping us get a handle on, get a feeling for conceptually how this mind works that we experience as just one complete situation. We're walking out, we walk out into the parking area, we get in our car, and we go to drive out, and somebody pulls in front of us, and then we have to slam on our brakes or something, and we realize, they weren't watching where they were going. And so that can happen lots of different, we can notice there's some kind of maybe resentment or irritation, and it would be different with everyone. Everyone's a little bit different about that kind of thing. Then the other combination of things that can occur is how you feel that particular day. We've all noticed that there's some days when life is not good. And then there's other days where, even though nothing wonderful has happened necessarily, we just feel really good. We just feel really up. We feel positive. We interact with our environment and the people in our environment in a really, like, this is how life should be kind of thing. And yet there's no apparent cause for any of that. And quite often the ego mind or the self-centered mind or the seventh consciousness wants to find a cause. It wants to find, well, this must be because I'm, because of this, whatever, Wellbutrin that I'm taking. It could be almost anything. You can attribute it to almost anything. Or I just got off the Wellbutrin. Finally, I feel better. I mean, either way seems to work. People I've talked to anyway. So this is a teaching that comes out of the tradition, 2nd, 3rd, 4th century of Tibetan, not Tibetan, but of Buddhism as it began to arise in ancient India and in China. This kind of teaching is connected with a tradition called Vijnanavada, or the mind only. And so, as I said before, and I'll say again because I think it bears repeating, this is not the way it is. This is a way of looking at whatever it is that we experience as ourselves, as a living being, being born and going through life and experiencing things through our sense organs, through our mental consciousness. The mental situation is very difficult. It's so incredibly subjective. It's very difficult to get any kind of a understanding of that. It's just like we have an understanding of sound. It's always very consistent. This runs into that, and it makes a certain sound. And if I did this, and this, all of a sudden you heard the drum over there, something is off. And if you hit the drum over there and it sounded like this, it means somebody didn't turn on the dehumidifier. Like, right? How'd the drum sound in there? I like that. So causes and conditions, things, this runs into that, which causes this, and it is us. And we're the ones who pick things out and make something special. We miss all of the different things that are happening in between, which are uncountable numbers of things that occur that blend in with and are somewhat hidden in the apparent causes and conditions that we use to explain to ourselves what's happening. In other words, if you suddenly feel really good, you can't say for sure. We like to speculate, and we like to say, well, this is because. It's like my situation is I have a lot of arthritis here and there, and especially in my hands. But I've been taking, what is that I've been taking? Turmeric. That Yogado, a student of mine up in Minneapolis, started taking. And so I didn't notice anything for a long time, but it's very, very slowly over the last several months, the pain in my hands has backed off. So it's very, very minimal now compared to what it was. There was a while there I couldn't hardly pick up a coffee cup for fear of dropping it because of just a shock-like pains going through my thumbs, fingers, hands. But, you know, knock on wood, not superstitious, but knock on wood, because it would probably be, that didn't come back. If that came back, it was because I didn't knock on wood. So make sure you got your bases covered. So it's interesting, and I'd like to emphasize this as much as I can. And this is something that is specific to the way that I teach. It is not about what occurs in the mind. It is not about what occurs by way of success or failure or good or evil or any other contrast you want to use. It is the awareness of the space in which things occur. You cannot have sound without space. You cannot have sights without space. You cannot have thoughts without space. And I encourage you as meditators, for whatever length of time that you've been able to get yourself to sit down and do nothing but watch what happens, what occurs in the sense fields and the mind, I encourage you to try to see the space in which things occur, not just what's occurring. You can see what's occurring, but then see the space in which it occurs. See if you can see that space, and you'll notice that the space is there before and the space is there after. The space goes nowhere. It's just space. I was just asked a while ago, how do you, because I say don't believe your thoughts, then how do you trust yourself if you're not believing your thoughts? Well, you see the thoughts, and you, rather than grasp belief, reject disbelief, or turn away ignorance, which are the three poisons, the three ways we handle our comfort, discomfort. Rather than do that, see if you can bring some of that awareness you've been developing in the sitting posture, looking at the wall, looking at the floor, whatever it is you're doing. Bring some of that in, the awareness of that in, so you can see that whatever is arising, whether it's true or untrue, doesn't make that much difference. If you just see the space, then you won't see the value of it, plus or minus. It won't happen in the seventh consciousness. It'll happen in a more profound way. It'll happen in terms of the eighth. I mean, yes, the eighth consciousness, which doesn't have any judgment going on. It's not about right and wrong. So, and if you do that, then you will be able to see the interesting way in which thoughts occur, and they contrast with other thoughts. And so you're able to see this, witness this, without ascribing higher value to one than to the other. This is not comfort making to ego. Ego wants to know what's right and what's wrong. So it will try to find right and wrong in that experience. And of course, this is not trusting the space. This is trying to find a right thought that is trustworthy. All thoughts are lies. Every single one of them is a lie, because it is relative truth. We're not saying that it isn't relatively true, but ultimately it's a lie. So interesting area to bring our minds into. Questions at this point?
What consciousness does ego belong to?
The seventh, the Klesha mind. So you've got the first 5 sense consciousnesses. Then you got just the basic process of thinking that synchronizes everything and makes everything work. And that is extended into areas that aren't even in consciousness, like breathing, blood flow, blood sugar. I like to say the glomeruli in your kidneys, because that's a whole lot. That's a million things that you've got to organize. There's a million of them, you know. You should say, how do you know? Did you count them? I wonder if anybody ever counted them. Somebody just said a lot and say, a million sounds good. Let's go with that. But
can ego be considered one specific thing, or is it something other than that, multitudinous things?
This is why it's difficult. It's not a thing. It is a kind of an attitude. Trungpa Rinpoche, my first teacher, called it a paranoid insurance policy. It's just a total idea of being protective all the time. And protecting yourself, there's the insurance policy. Make sure that nothing gets to you, that nothing takes you out, that nothing disrespects you, that nothing looks, and make sure and promote yourself to make sure you take the best possible, comb your hair before you go out. Don't look scruffy like you look.
So we're looking at
you don't really look scruffy. I was just taking.
I'm ready for a shave. I can tell.
Yeah, you are ready. Thank you. Joke is laughing because usually I'm picking on him. Go ahead.
Okay, we're working. We're focusing on the fifth skandha, which is consciousness. How many consciousnesses are there?
Well, according to this tradition, there's probably lots of nuance going on there that is difficult to track, and there are some people who say there are 9 and 10, depending on. But for our purposes, we're saying the first 5 sense consciousnesses: taste, touch, smell, sight. What's that other one?
Sound.
Huh?
Sound.
What?
Yes.
I didn't hear anything. So, and then thinking comes up, and the thinking is kind of think of that as what is organizing, and so that we know that it's the same consciousness that is the smell is the same one that's hearing, not two different. So that the upside of that is that it was synchronized. The downside of it starts to look like somebody. And then the 7th comes in and says, it is somebody. And it says, where's the somebody? I don't see any somebody. And it points up to the 8th. Well, there's a somebody. I'm just kind of hanging out doing my job here. Well, are you a self? No, I'm not a self. I'm just protecting. More? That's good. That's a good question.
Well, by making all these divisions and seeing that these places where consciousness exists, and then comparing or contrasting these divisions to the space in which they arise, what is that showing us? What is seeing the space teaching us?
It's seeing that the space itself is quite often missed by locking down or fixating on something that rises in space. Locking down on it. So the sense fields don't really do that so much. You smell something, it comes, it's there, it's present, it's right now, it's gone. Very hard to remember a smell. Remember a sound easier than you can remember maybe a taste or a smell, because those are so very intimate. And again, if you were to simplify the whole thing using the 5 skandhas, you would say there's really only 2 skandhas: form and consciousness. Form and everything else. That's just consciousness of touch, consciousness of sound, consciousness of sight, colors. But we tend to make something, we tend to add something to it. We name things, and then we project ideas of good and bad, ours and others, ownership and all that on top of that. not wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it leads to a circularity that ends up, because of the self-centeredness, that starts ending up in warfare. Even simple people, two people who love each other, really care about each other, will fight with each other because of a misunderstanding. And that misunderstanding is that there's a solid me and a solid you. And you are not respecting me. But what's actually happening is that you is doing something because of causes and conditions that are completely unfathomable. Is doing something that in this moment, this particular situation, is triggering something that you have been hiding out from. Is a simple way of putting it. And that hiding out happens in the Alaya. Hi, Ruby. That hiding out, you could say that's part of the eighth consciousness. And so we're just using this as a way to try to access this. It's an ancient way, ancient technology way, but it still seems to work. More? Good question.
Is there a difference between becoming aware of the space in which thoughts, feelings, perception arise, and awareness itself?
Yes. Being aware of the space in which thoughts, feelings arise is called the path. So there's a threefold logic: ground, path, fruition. I'll say it again: ground, the basis of something. The path to work with that basis, whatever it is that's bringing that about. And then the fruition. So the ground is suffering. In Buddhism, the ground of Buddhism is life of suffering or discontent or difficult, frustrating, irritating, whatever, dissatisfying. I'm not saying that we don't have times when that isn't happening, but that's because we're ignoring it. It's not because it isn't there. Actually ignoring that. And I can talk about the three types of suffering at some point later. But first, let's just cover this part. So ground is suffering, and then the path is how to relate to that suffering, how to deal with it, how to work with it. So what we do is we take the awareness into these different ways of looking at the breakdown, so we can see how things get triggered that are actually unreal, how we believe things that are just happened by the very incredibly creative nature of the mind. The mind is so creative. It will create, rather than just sit here, it'll create a war. It's happening everywhere. So the ground is the suffering or the separation or the warfare, and the path is how to work with that, how to look at that, how to work with that. So in this way, we have concepts. The eight consciousnesses is one way of helping us take our conceptual mind, which wants to praise and blame, take it almost scientifically right down into this. That's why it's an ancient technology, because it is a technology. Take it down in there, and so that's the path part of it. But the fruition is not separate. Everything, space, things arising in space, you, me, this world, the universe, the multiverse. You can't find anything that you're separate from. Everything is completely without an other. And it's realization. And until you realize it, you'll fight with your mind, or you'll fight with the things that arise in your mind. I'm not just saying you, but anyone. Until you actually realize who you are. And who you are is not separate. And that means there isn't anything that you aren't. But it has to be a realization. It can't be just some kind of conceptual positionality. Now, depending on how conceptual you are, it might start out as that. It might start out as, well, we're all one, and we're all, we're not separate. Well, this is obvious. Everything is dependently arisen, and I understand that. But as long as it's just running around in the conceptual field, you notice that you're very susceptible to being swayed. That you can be actually talked out of it temporarily, or you can start to have doubts about it because you'll think your emotions are real. I'm not saying they're not there. I'm not saying they don't have a tendency, but it's like a horror movie. You watch it, and you're really scared. At the same time, your mind is saying, this is a movie. But you can't continue to watch it because it's too frightening. Maybe not you, because I know you're very brave. You should be laughing. You follow me? So what we do is we get hooked because the sensitivity of the mind is so very sensitive. We get very frightened, and occasionally we meet people that are not really afraid of those kind of things. They love horror movies. They're very entertaining because they're so clear that they're unreal. So therefore, they can enjoy them, or other people cannot. And sometimes people even go through processes where they're, when I was young, I could watch that. I could watch anything. But as I get older, it's more and more less and less entertaining to watch people be chopped up, beat up, killed. So more?
I don't want to hog all the space here, but I do have a few questions.
Go ahead. They can interrupt.
Is realization of the fruit a complete understanding of the space in which things arise?
What question? Yes, it is. Complete understanding.
What are the qualities of that space?
Not separate. Everything that is apparently separated, ultimately you see it's not separate. So you understand relative truth and ultimate truth are not different. Not two. Not two. In the ancient Indian tradition, it's called Advaita, non-dual. Non-dual. And in the Tibetan tradition, non-dual. The Mahayana tradition, not two. Samdhinirmocana Sutra, not two. Lankavatara Sutra, not two. They're all saying the same thing. They're coming from different directions, not two.
Is that to say that the space itself is a reflection of the things, or rather reflects the things that arise within it?
That would be a little bit too conceptual, and someone who was realized would probably not use that, because that would be further down the ladder. But on the other hand, if a person who was teaching out of realization were to address a person, they might, because they would understand that would help a person, bring the person further up, maybe one more rung up the ladder. Just talk about it relatively. They may use that as an expression. But the fundamental expression is speechless. That's why one who realizes this, sometimes people who this is realize they can't. You become speechless. You can't say it. You can't express it. But then if you continue to work with it, at some point you realize that you can point to it conceptually. But you have to really realize it. Otherwise, it just becomes words you're not sure of. Yes?
From Shane out in California.
Yes, Shane.
He asks, how do these concepts help us understand the understandable?
The ununderstandable? Read that again.
How do these concepts help us understand the ununderstandable?
Because they help us in the way that they magnetize our intellect and our thinking process to go as far as it can to make sense out of this, as far as it can. And then at some point, you're probably going to need a teacher to kick you the rest of the way. It still shows live. Yeah, it's still alive. Yes.
A question from Jigme up in Traverse City.
Jigme.
He asks, can a transformation occur in the fifth skandha? If so, what would that do to habit energy?
It would still function. And yes, it can. Fifth skandha is a way of talking about all of the consciousnesses, the seventh, eighth, the first five, the sixth, seventh, eighth, and transformation would happen, or realization would happen everywhere. And nothing would happen to it. Whatever it was you asked about. Further questions online? Any from here someone who hasn't asked a question? Ruby, you have a question? How are you feeling? Tired. Gotcha. Yes, sir.
You said earlier that the seventh consciousness points to the eighth consciousness to say that that's the self.
Yeah, it's not going to be, it's not the self, it's just working out for the self. Because it knows it's full of it.
How does it interpret the eighth as a self?
That's where all this stuff comes from. So again, just a way of talking about it. You could talk about it the other way around. You could say there's a seventh, you could point at itself and say, I'm the self. It's just a traditional way of talking about it.
So it's the totality of the eighth consciousness that is identified as the self,
That would
not
be
just what is arising out of or from the eighth consciousness.
what do you think?
Seems like it would be the totality of it.
Okay, I'll go with that. Further questions? Yes, Jeff.
Does everything come out of the consciousness? Are all the ones below it actually coming out?
So that's good. So and actually, there's some reciprocity, like the sound. Is a sense of sound. That's one of the sense consciousnesses, one of the first five. So and that's going. That seems to be, if you want to use a directionality, that's going kind of up into that. And so it might go. We might. You could say that the seventh consciousness might block some things out. That doesn't want to have that kind of an experience. Wants to get away from that. Things coming down out of the eighth. Again, I emphasize it's just a way of talking. We don't know what this actually is. We're just trying to lay some kind of a grid on it to give us a little bit more access to the way it functions. And there are different opinions. If you study Yogacara, which I think you've done some study of that. If you study it, you'll find that there are different interpretations, especially using the Tibetan tradition, the Chinese tradition, and so on. There are different ways of understanding it. But it seems to work both directions. Cheryl?
Hi.
Hi. Any questions? Yes. Kevin.
Are these considered fundamental reference points for understanding how the mind works?
It's just as one way of doing it, and this is taught in lots of different traditions. The Yogacara Vijnapti mantra is the Sanskrit word for it. This is used a lot. There's lots of translations. We've spent time studying a lot of this material. Lankavatara Sutra, Samdhinirvachana Sutra, the works of Vasubandhu and his brother Sangha. So people are taking, just like Nagarjuna took the teachings of the Buddha and started and actually brought it along by talking more conceptually about the nature of emptiness, saying that with the things are both true and untrue. Things are both something exists and it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, nor does it not exist, nor is it both, nor is it neither. Fourfold negation, taking anything and just basically wiping it out. Which I don't understand that. You? What does it mean to understand? To stand under something? How's that help? Question? We have a few minutes left.
Are there finite ways in which the mind can be pointed at with reference points or put a grid over, as you say?
Well, I don't know, because all I work with is consciousness and have been doing it for a long time. So I'm not saying that there aren't ways that science couldn't go into structures in the mind of the brain or whatever and maybe find out things. But so far, nobody's really found consciousness, what that actually is. They attribute certain things, and they talk about synapses in the mind, and they tweak this part of the brain or this part, they stimulate it, the person will have a memory of, this or that. But there's so many ways of accessing, going into this. It's just amazing. It's really amazing. We think science thinks materialistic, scientific materialism, think they know so much. That's because they're not willing to acknowledge what they don't know. Because then it would look like they kind of invalidate what they already know, which of course it does. It would have to invalidate it, because if they discuss, it's just like the flat Earth. Earth is flat. Oh no, it's round. Everything starts to change.
Right. By pointing out these forms of the mind, is that in order to discover that they're not real, or rather that they arise in emptiness?
They're both real and unreal. That's why it's such a conundrum. It's not two. If you take the word reality, you take the word unreality. Both and neither. Just can't find it. If you really begin to use the intelligence of the mind rather than just to sort things out and try to get advantage for yourself or keep away things that are going to be harmful, if you just use your mind like that, your whole life can go by just kind of protecting yourself from phantoms and also things that are really harmful to you physically or mentally. But if you begin to use the mind as we do here to see what is the mind, who is it that sees, who is it, what is it that's smelling, tasting, touching, who is it that's afraid, to actually go in and try to find an identity. The fundamental confusion is belief, and it's a solid belief, very solid, that there is someone. You think, not accusing you of anything that wouldn't accuse anyone else. And you could say me, well, Sokuzan, don't you believe you're sitting there? You should ask me that question, and you'll get an answer that you should work on. Go ahead.
Do you believe that you're sitting there?
You're supposed to say Sokuzan first.
Oh. Sokuzan, do you believe that you're sitting there?
I both believe it and disbelieve it. And I neither believe it nor do I disbelieve it. And that's a genuine response coming out of how I understand this. I would have to say this way. And even though it might sound disrespectful to you, it's certainly not meant to be. And there's nothing I want more than have everybody in this room or anyone who's listening and anyone who's not listening to awaken to who they really are. So the warfare in your body, mind, your heart can just stop. So you can stop fighting with yourself and enjoy your life, whatever you have left of it. So many people are fighting with agendas and have to accomplish things and have to, they're wrong, I'm right, they're wrong. And it's belief in itself. There's no self. So you don't have to get rid of an ego. You just have to see it's unreal.
Is it important to first see how we separate things in order to see how we are not separated with those things?
It's an awareness that sees how things function in a very impersonal kind of way. I use the word contrast. If you see a light area and a dark area, you see there's a difference between the two. But really, it's the same thing. It's just things it has to do with light. Not much light, a lot of light. So it doesn't make one evil and one good. It's just the way the situation works. But what happens is we tend to personalize it because of the incredible intensity of the consciousness, and incredible creativity of human beings. Human beings are amazingly creative. Aliens are really jealous of us because they're not very smart. I hope they're not listening. I don't really care if they're listening. Yes.
Text from Anna Maria, who's on her way back to Brooklyn.
Yes, Anna Maria.
I think she's in Chicago right now. Are you saying that space is empty of anything arising?
So space is a concept, empty is a concept, arising is a concept, thing is a concept. So, but bringing that all together, I would say yes and no. That's as valid an answer response as I can get, because she's in a sense, even though it's a sincere question, she's kind of baiting me, and not intentional, but it's like it won't float. It won't, because we're looking for some kind of okay, now we know. Yes, Lisa.
So is this fifth skandha consciousness essentially the thing we're looking at when we're sitting on the cushion?
Yes. Yeah, you're just everything that's coming through. You're observing. You're observing your butt on the cushion, your hands in your lap. Kind of a boring lunar landscape on the wall. And then the sound of the fan, of the air conditioner, or nothing, or the birds in the trees, or the person next to you belching. Just very simple things are rising and going, rising and leaving, rising and leaving. But you're just there. You're just aware of this. Just being, as they say, as it has been said, you're just a good host. You're not, whatever comes in the door, fine, have a seat. It's like the story I was just repeating. I think it was to Anna Maria in the last interview I had with her today. It's like the Milarepa, the great Tibetan yogi and saint, ancient times, ancient Tibet, was in his cave, and there were in his he'd been in retreat for a long time. He was a student of Marpa the translator, and these demons, or aspects of his own consciousness, whatever you want to call it, were bugging him. They were always interfering with his meditation and so on. And as the story goes, and he's sitting in there, and they apparently have big saucer-like eyes, and they're, trying to give him a hard time. And for a while, he fights with them and tries everything. He does all kinds of, what does he do? What do they call this? Exorcisms and special mantras dealing with demons and so on, and nothing. Finally, he just pours them a cup of tea. Here, have some tea, and they all go woof, because he no longer was fighting with them. No longer set up a situation where they could actually function. They function out of any of that stuff functions out of fear, open fear, the bandits of open fear. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. You can dedicate the merit.
In the back of your red chant books is our dedication of merit. Also, I'd like to remind everybody about our donation boxes in the hallway, also online. Please help us.
May merit penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. San Chi Chi Son Bu Sa Mo Bu Sa Wo To Ho Ja Hu Ru Yin The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.